The American Legion, celebrating a century of honoring and supporting America's veterans and their families.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Fonz, longtime host of Fonz and Porter's Love of Quilting on public television. My passion for quilting has kept me hard at work these past few years, making quilts of valor for military service members and veterans. During this special program, we'll travel around the country to see how and where quilts of valor are made, how they're awarded, and how they impact the veterans who receive them. I'll also be reunited in the sewing room with a couple of familiar faces, television quilting teachers Alex Anderson and Mark Lipinski. Together, we'll work on a beautiful quilt of valor top while we recall how personally making and awarding quilts of valor has impacted our own lives. First, let's take a look back at the original Quilts of Valor special, where we met Catherine Roberts, founder of the Quilts of Valor Foundation. It was this military mom's vision of a post-deployment soldier wrapped in a comforting quilt that has resulted in the awarding of over 130,000 Quilts of Valor.
When my son was deployed, I was always 10 seconds from panic because I never knew what was going to happen. At that time, we had just gone to war. We were in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the nation was, let's support our troops. And it was all about sending things downrange or to the theater. My thoughts were, I want to do something to help those who come back wounded. A quilt seemed the logical answer as to what could I do to help those who are serving in harm's way. And that would bring you comfort in the wee hours of the morning when you are wrestling with those war demons. And so that to me made the most sense. And also being in the medical field, I know that suffering comes in many different ways. And that quilt is something tangible. It says thank you, an unconditional thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and your valor. Somehow it just worked out that I got this organization started. What I wanted is I wanted a quilt made for those who were wounded that would represent, as I thought in those days, like a Purple Heart Award. And I wanted this quilt made so that it was the best possible quilt that anyone could ever have, and that it would last through someone's lifetime and be able to be passed on to sons and daughters and relatives. So in 2003, there were maybe 3 Quilts of Valor. And then through the power and the magic of the internet, more people got involved. So I can remember when we were getting close to 100 Quilts of Valor. It was like it was a stellar day. Oh my gosh, 100 Quilts of Valor. And so little by little, it sort of grew exponentially.
As Quilts of Valor has evolved from a grassroots movement into a national nonprofit foundation, quilters and supporters from all parts of the country have stepped up to take on leadership positions, all without pay. Serving as executive director from September 2013 to September 2015, Susan Gordon has helped guide the foundation in its goal of awarding a Quilt of Valor to every service member and veteran touched by war.
You know, we really sometimes have a problem with our mission statement because touched by war is such a ambiguous thought in some people's minds. You know, how do I know? Well, one of the things that we have decided is that we don't make that decision. The veterans and their families make that decision. They know what it's cost them. Someone does not need to leave the United States to be touched by war in one way or another. I was very lucky to be here as executive director when we hit our 100,000th quilt. And we went to Washington, D.C. We knew in that month that we were going to reach 100,000 quilts awarded, but it didn't matter which quilt it was. It was people all over the country who were making these awards. But we wanted to commemorate the 100,000th quilt, where the first one was awarded. And so we were at Walter Reed. There were about 20 recipients that day, and some were on stretchers, some were on crutches, there were amputees. Quilts have a kind of magic about them. People feel comforted as well as warmed by them, and it was wonderful to see how much these quilts meant to these people, because they meant a lot to the women and men who make them. So it was a wonderful opportunity to remember that we had now reached 100,000 quilts in 10 years, all done by volunteers across this country.